Chapter 9, Land Use Regulations and Environmental Issues. In this chapter, we're going to be able to distinguish between the private land use controls and government powers and learn what those government powers are relating to public land use controls. We're going to describe environmental issues and hazardous substances, especially those that are subject to federal legislation and landmark preservation and historic sites. So, the ownership rights that a person possesses in a parcel of real estate, they're subject to public and private land use controls, including zoning ordinances, building codes, and deed restrictions. So, page 146, let's do some highlights here. Deed restrictions are placed on property by private parties, not by governments. Governments have their own powers on dictating what you could do with your property through their building codes and such. Deed restrictions are restrictions placed in deeds by private parties. You're the owner of the property. You sell your property. You could put restrictions in the deeds on how the property can or cannot be used in the future. If the buyer purchases the property agreeing to those terms, they're bound by them. And if they violate those agreements, those terms, you can go to court and require them to give you back the property because they violated the terms of the sale that they agreed to. And you don't got to pay them a penny for it. Right? They're the ones that violated the terms of the sale. Right? So deed restrictions placed on property by private parties, not by governments. They're called restrictions placed in deeds are called restrictive covenants. A covenant is a legal promise. These are restrictive legal promises, so it's a restrictive covenants. These are all terms you need to know. Illegal restrictions in deeds that violate the law are not enforceable, but if there's any other restrictions in the deed that are still valid and not illegal, well, it does not discount the whole document and invalidate the whole document, just those illegal restrictions. Like if you had one that says that a person of color couldn't own the property, well, obviously that's an illegal restriction. So that restriction would be invalidated because it's in violation of the law. Now, the governor last year, was it last year or the year before, put a mandate that all people in charge of public records at the County Hall of Records have to go through all of the old property records that are out there and remove any references to illegal restrictions that pertain to race anyway. I don't think it dealt with removing all illegal restrictions, only the ones that deal with race, that mentioned that you couldn't sell the property to a person of color or something of that nature. Deed restrictions, they run with the land. Once a restriction is placed in the deed, it passes from one owner to the next. That's what running with the land means. And restrictions can be added with time limitations or upon the happening of a certain event. We'll refer to these as sunset clauses. Like politicians can pass laws that a tax for the building of our roads that we call toll booths will only be as long as we need to generate money to pay for the roads, right? Of course, they didn't put a sunset clause in that because even to this day, we're still having tolls and they just keep raising them. So let's do the highlights here and let's write here runs with the land. And under enforcement, let's also add owners, remainder men, heirs, and devisees. So the neighbors or the original subdivider, who was probably the owner at the time, could enforce the deed restrictions through court action that they put in there. Owners, remainder men, heirs, or devisees can as well. You guys all have that? Let me know so I can.
Yeah, good.
Okay. All right. The government has powers. What are the government's powers? Well, an acronym that one of my former teachers added to this book is PEAP. Police power, eminent domain, taxation, and dispute. PETE. I hate acronyms. Too many acronyms. They're hard to remember what the hell they stand for. But sometimes they could be helpful, but too many, all you're doing is memorizing acronyms. So, what is a police power? What is a police power the government has? Well, police. Can the police just come on your property?
No,
No, they need a warrant. But what if they were chasing a violent criminal that ran into your front door and slammed the door behind you? Can they pursue them? You see, sometimes there's exceptions to these rules. So police power is not just about the cops. Police power is passed on from the federal governments to the states, counties, and municipalities to make legislation for the general welfare of the public that could place restrictions on an owner's property, such as policing, the police, environmental protection laws, zoning and building ordinances, regulating the use, size, occupancy, construction, and even the rental of real estate. You know that you can't rent your own property out without getting a permit? Did you guys know that? You need a permit to rent your own property. Who comes up with this idiocy? It's my property. I should be able to do with it whatever I want. Yeah. Until somebody's like, somebody does something unbelievably stupid, and then people are like, should to prevent that from happening. Yeah. What about common sense? And then just holding one person responsible for their actions. So then you don't need to create laws that have sometimes gray areas, but the law does not deal in gray; they deal in black and white, right? So now we have to pay a permit to be able to to get permission to rent our own property from the local government, and then we need to get an inspection from the fire inspection and zoning officials before we can rent it out as well. And any time that we change the renters, and we have to pay a permit for that as well. Why? Because somebody was like, there should be a law because something happened and they created a law, and now you're subject to all of these restrictions. The same thing with zoning and building ordinances. They dictate what can be built where and what the purpose of the building can be. Can I build a commercial property in the middle of a residential neighborhood?
no,
No. Because someone said there should be a law. Somebody put some kind of commercial property that really didn't fit in with the neighborhood. And it had a negative effect and it was really bad. And then somebody said there should be a law. So your local politicians created a law that said that. But you know what? If they did not create a law that prevented it, sure you can. You could put whatever the hell you want on your property. The thing is, most municipalities adopt zoning and building ordinances from the neighboring municipalities, and they create the same rules. Each municipality, it's up to each municipality to adopt their own building and zoning regulations. You guys know when the first zoning law was created in New Jersey? No? 1967 in Trenton. So I don't know what the first zoning law was, but the first zoning law ever created in New Jersey, restricting how a person can use their property, was made in 1967, and it was in Trenton. All of the municipalities in the state did not have any zoning laws yet. It's up to each municipality to create those zoning laws. So does your municipality allow commercial properties to be built next to residential? Maybe. Depends if they created that zoning law that said that they can't. Okay. It's dependent all on these laws, these zoning ordinances. Um, how high or how large of a building that you can create. You want to put can you put a house up on your property in a residential zone? It depends. What's the lot size? There may be restrictions on the size of the lot, how big of a structure you could build, and even if you can build one. So if you have you own land in a residential area, if it's not large enough, they're not going to allow you to build a small house on it because they may have restrictions that you need to have at least a 50-foot wide by 100-foot deep property to build a house. They could have zoning restrictions like that. Okay. In different areas of the town, they could vary too. In other areas of the same municipality, it could be a 40 by 100 lot requirement, and then, well, what size of house can I build? Well, there may be restrictions on how high you could build it, how deep the basements can be, what the total square footage is. We're having this issue in my town right now. Because in my town right now, we have a huge Hasidic Jewish population that's moving here, and they're buying up all the houses cash for well above market value, and then they're every square inch of the property because there was no zoning ordinances against it. So they're building these basements that they dig. They're like 2-story deep basements. And then the houses are ginormous. I call them McMansions, I got them all around me. Are they increasing the property values? Sure they are. That's a benefit, that you got a lot of people now that they're like, well, they're building right up to the property line, and they're uh, then they're extending their HVAC past that, and they're violating all kinds of rules, and then they're putting in many families in that single family house because they're putting in like 10 different entrances, and there's all kinds of arguments now that are happening in the municipality amongst the current residents and the new populations that's moving in. So there's people like, there should be a law. And then you have the Hasidic population that's moving in. They're like, well, you're creating laws that are discriminatory because you're creating them against us because we're moving in. So they're not either. So you got to have a balance for everybody that's living there, though. The problem is our town was planning on voting this legislation in for years. They just never have. And now when they're choosing to do it is the same time where a lot of people are complaining, and then all this new population's moving in, and now it does seem discriminatory. So in the eyes of a court, it could be deemed discriminatory if they wanted to sue. So it's there's a lot happening right here now there, but that's all covers under the police power. Eminent domain is another power of the government. It's their power to seize your property, your privately owned property, your private property. The government can take your land from you. However, they need to justly compensate you for it, whatever the current market value is. Now, can the government just take your property just because they want it? No, they have to prove that they have a need for it, if you were to argue against it anyway. So it has to be needed for a greater public good, and the property owner needs to be justly compensated for that property. I'm using those air quotes there because what is a greater public good? You see eminent domain laws abused all the time. Well, a developer wanted to take this land so that they could put in a high-rise apartment building. How come they need my land for that? How come they need the property right here? Oh, it's very selective. They could put that anywhere. Do they need my property? Oh, no, mine's just at a better location, and that's why they want my property. So if you could prove that in court, then they can't just take your property away if there's other properties that they could take. It's right now we're seeing that happening on a piece of farmland in New Jersey. Where the hell was that? In Cranberry, right? But yeah, these eminent domain laws are abused all the time. And then developers get into an agreement and they give some money in advance even to the municipalities to try to take the property from the person, pay them for it, and then they turn over the ownership to the developer so that they can then start developing whatever it is that they want to build. And then if the government's unable to do that, then the developer will threaten to sue the municipality because they had an agreement with them for a property that they don't even own, which should be criminal. There should be a law against that. Municipalities scheming to take away people's properties to hand them over to developers. Right? Now, when the property is when the owner's fighting to keep their property, and the developer or the city's trying to take it through court action, that's called a condemnation. So when take when the government's taking away the property through the court system, it's called a condemnation hearing, condemnation suit. So eminent domain is the power of the government to take your private property with just compensation. Condemnation is the process of taking it through the court system. You guys understand the difference between those two terms? Eminent domain is the power to take away the property. Condemnation is the actual taking of the property through the courts. You'll need to know that difference for exams. And a lot of people have the powers of eminent domain. Eminent domain powers are granted to the government and certain quasi-governmental authorities like public utilities, land clearance commissions, railroads, housing and redevelopment authorities. Okay. Can I, Victor Kaminsky, take your property by eminent domain? What do you think, guys? Can I take away your property by eminent domain?
Probably not. Well, maybe no. I think you can. You can if you make a good case for it.
Okay, so I went to seminars, many investment seminars and things of that nature in the past. And I went to this one seminar about writing grants and getting grants that the government has available for various things. And there was one very interesting thing that the guy told me there, because in the book of grants, I asked a question. I was like, I don't qualify for most of these grants. These grants are written for very specific purposes, and I don't qualify for any of these. I can't get these grants. And then he asked everybody, he's like, is that true? Do most of you not qualify for these things? You don't think that you could get it? And he's like, here, there's something I learned a long time ago. He's like, you don't need to be the one that qualifies. You just need to know who the one is that does qualify. And then what you could do is you could get these partnerships and you build relationships with people that have the ability to get the grants so that you can therefore get the grants. So can me, Victor Kaminsky, take your property by eminent domain? I don't have the powers of eminent domain. However, I could go wine and dine some greedy politician in town that does have the powers of eminent domain and tell them how it's in their best interest that if you use your powers of eminent domain to seize this person's property and then turn it over to me, which I will then pay back and reimburse you all the money that you laid out to get it, all the tax revenue that my building project here is going to generate for the municipality, that's the greater good that will serve for the public domain, for the public. So you could use your powers of eminent domain to take this property and give it to me, because all the tax revenue that will be created from this, that's what's in the best interest of the public. That's why it's for a greater public good. So technically, can we take any property by using that train of thought? Yeah, pretty much, if it's abused, because that's not really the intended purpose of a greater public good. Hey, we can generate all this tax revenue if I steal your property from you, pay you whatever it's worth, turn it over to a developer so that they can use it. Oh, that sounds like the government picking favorites here and taking people's private land. That's not really a good reason, you know. But yet they do it. And the interesting thing is, if you look on page 147, I don't think I have this screenshot here in the book, but there's something called Kelo versus New London. You guys see that on page 147? Kelo versus New London. In this court case, let me see, specifically property area. The property owners argue the city violated the Fifth Amendment's takings clause, which granted the government will not take private property for the public use without just compensation. Specifically, the property owners argued taking private property to sell to private developers was not a public use. And the Connecticut Supreme Court, and eventually in 2005, the United States Supreme Court, ruled 5-4 for New London. After the court's decision, the city allowed private developers to proceed with its plans. However, the developer was unable to obtain financing and abandoned their project, and the contested land remained an undeveloped, empty lot. So it looks like the Supreme Court did allow the taking of that private land to turn over to a developer, which is a shame. Just to turn it over to developers, is that really a greater public good? No, and the Supreme Court was pretty split on it too. It looks like that ran right down political, probably party lines, even though courts are not supposed to be political. It looks like 5-4 decision it was. All right. We also have taxation as a charge used to fund the operation of government. We went over that in all in the last chapter. That's what it was all about. And escheat. What is escheat? I got to wait for you to remember this. When you die intestate, what does that mean? Without a will. And no heirs can be located. The property would revert to the state. In other words, they escheated you out of your property. All right. So escheat, nobody's getting cheated out of their property. I just use that as a joke, as a pun, escheat. They escheated you out of your property. Anyway, when you die and you don't have a will citing how you want your property disposed, who do you want to get your property when you die? And no heirs step forward to claim it. The state will sell the property at auction and keep the money. Do you guys want the government to get your stuff when you die? Or did they get enough of your stuff while you were alive paying the taxes? All right. Write a will. You guys can write one on a napkin right now, and you know that'll be legal. New Jersey, it's called a holographic will, a handwritten will. That's called a holographic will. And it doesn't require any witnesses. If you completely handwrite the entire will. If you type it up or if you use any of that will-making software or whatever, and you don't go to an attorney, you just do it yourself, and you print it out, it requires 2 witnesses, and their signatures should be notarized so that it would be valid. And yes, somebody who's a beneficiary in a will can also serve as a witness. All right. So anyway, to avoid them cheating you out of your property when you die, you may want to have a will. Giving it to anyone, even a charity, give it to somebody other than the government. They got enough land. Any land that was not claimed for private ownership, it is now government owned land. And that's more than half the land in the United States has been unclaimed by people. Just go the middle of the country to the west. There's auctions all over. You could find government auctions all over where they're trying to sell the private land. But there's a lot of land out there that's just unclaimed, so it's now deemed government-owned property. So what are the four governmental powers? Police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat. And what is condemnation? It's the court process of taking the property using the powers of eminent domain. So here we go. Police power, we got that highlighted. And eminent domain, we should highlight that first sentence in both of these bullet points. And taxation and escheat. Give that cross-reference. Chapter 20, page 377 is where they got that escheat. All right, everybody got that? All right, so once again, police power, eminent domain, taxation, and escheat, all there on one page. If you like to snap a picture and have it for your own notes there. All right. Municipal governments they're authorized to implement a local master plan. A master plan is kind of like a business plan, right? Before you start a business, you got to create a business plan, right? On how you're going to manage that business and run it. Municipalities have to do the same thing. They got to create a master plan about how they're going to run and manage that municipality, including for emergency situations, natural disasters, and war. How are they going to handle the food and water supplies and sewage and waste removal? Every municipality in each county will have a master plan. They'll submit it to the county. Now the county will create a master plan for all the municipalities. Then each county submits their master plan to the state. And then every state submits their master plan to the federal government. That's the way our structure of government runs. Zoning ordinances, these are laws of local governmental authorities, the municipalities and counties, that regulate and control designated districts that they call zones. So they create these zoning ordinances to dictate what the land can be used for and what can be built on it, and maybe any building restrictions on height, setback from the property line, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there are 7 common zoning classes here: residential, commercial, mixed use, industrial, institutional, recreational, and government use. But there's many, there could be many. And residential, there's subclasses of zoning too. Because if something is zoned residential, does that mean I could put an apartment building on it too? A 4-family house, a 2-family house, 1 family? What can I build there? There are subclasses of zoning. And I'm going to show you this. I live in Linden, so I got the Linden zoning map here. I'm going to pull it up and show you an example of the zoning map. As you can see here, this is super zoomed out, and we could super zoom in on it. But before I do, there's a legend on the right-hand side over here. So we're going to zoom in on that legend. Whoa. Yeah, shrink this down a bit. Okay. So you could see there are different types of zoning here. Business districts, commercial, general commercial, retail commercial, economic development, heavy industrial, light industrial, et cetera, et cetera. Look, we got residential here. We got single family with 50-foot width lots, 2-family with 50-foot lots, 2-family with 40-foot lots, apartments, single families with 40-foot lots, residential, office, commercial, so it's mixed use area. And they're color coded. This map is color coded. So I live in this section of town that's red. Wait, do I live in that section of town? No, I don't. I live in this section of town, okay? And so this color code is for 50-foot wide lots for a single family house. So it requires a larger lot size to have a single family house than those other areas that require 40-foot. But you can see all the different classes of zoning there. If you downloaded the map, it'd be a lot clearer than what it's looking like in the browser window, too, by the way. So zoning ordinances are laws of the local government authorities, such as municipalities and counties, that regulate and control the use of the land and structures within designated districts and zones. So before an airport and after an airport runway, you think that they allow you to build skyscrapers? Probably not, right? Because airplanes got to come in at a glide path, right? Airplanes don't just sink down, and to do their landings. They don't do that. They come in at a glide path, a controlled, nice, smooth landing. But if you got a building here in the way, they're going to have to go and then steeply come down. So zoning ordinances would probably restrict how tall any structure can be built, leading up to runways on airports at a significant distance away still. Okay, so public ordinance, zoning ordinances were created first in 1967. You don't need to know that for exams. That's the information I just looked up. Exclusionary zoning, we already learned about in chapter 4. Remember court decisions and exclusionary zoning, and I teach you about builder's remedy. You guys remember that? So exclusionary zoning, who is excluded from these areas? Poor people, right? Remember, it's a discriminatory zoning practice outlawed by the Mount Laurel court decisions. It was a zoning power abuse requiring larger lot sizes anywhere in the municipality, effectively pricing poor people out of the neighborhoods. I mean, that wasn't their intention, but that was the end result. So there you go. And then you have a non-conforming use is a use that does not meet the current zoning requirements. But then again, it doesn't need to, because it was there before the zoning laws were ever created or changed that did not allow use that you're using it for. You guys ever see commercial stores, a candy store or something like that in the middle of a residential neighborhood? How did they get the permit to build that? That's a commercial property. How did they have a commercial store in the middle of a residential neighborhood? Well, because it was there before they ever created the zoning laws that say you can't have a commercial use in a residential neighborhood. So they were there first. So their use, even though they changed the law that would restrict anybody from creating a commercial use in a residential neighborhood, it is grandfathered because it was there before. It's old. That purpose is old, like your grandfather. So it's allowed to continue its use. The government can't just change the requirements and then require you to conform and say, well, you can't use it as a store no more. You know, they allow that store to be there. As long as you don't change its use or discontinue its use, then it's allowed to continue. Okay, that's what a non-conforming use is. The property does not conform to the current zoning requirements, but then again, it doesn't have to, it's grandfathered. Now, if you want to use a property for a purpose that does not meet the current zoning requirements, you can always apply for a variance to vary from the current zoning laws. So a variance is a permit that would allow you to use the property for a purpose that does not meet the current zoning requirements. And this is usually granted if somebody's experiencing a hardship because of the zoning laws that have been created or changed. I'll show you a couple examples of this on the coming slides. But do sometimes people just get variances that they weren't experiencing any kind of hardship? Sure. If the municipality is feeling generous and wants to allow it, or you know somebody. So the zoning board of appeals is who you file with that to get that variance. Now they could grant you the variance to build something that would not normally be allowed. But you'd also have to send out a letter to everyone within 300 feet of your property, giving them the opportunity to raise questions or say no. Now, subdivision regulations cover the following and then some: the location, grading, alignment, surfacing, and the widths of the streets, highways, and other rights of way, installation of sewer and water mains, minimum and maximum lot sizes, and density area ratios. Can I build on every square inch of my lot or not? Most municipalities have a requirement that you cannot build on every square, you cannot pave over or build over every square inch of your lot. Because if you do, when it rains, where does the water go? On your neighbor's property, right? Or what if all the neighbors now start building up on every square inch of their lot? Where does the water go? There's no ground to absorb it. Goes into the sewers. Now they start to get over flooded. Beyond the capacity. And now you get flooding in the streets and flooding in other places, right? So all of these things need to be taken into consideration by municipalities. Building and setback lines. Setbacks are more than these things that hold us back from reaching our goals and potential in life. Setbacks in this regard is the minimum distance from a property line that any structure can be built. All right, let's highlight this. This is actually a pretty good definition to study of exclusionary zoning, which is the same definition I gave you in chapter 3 on my slide, or chapter 4. It's exclusionary zoning was outlawed by the Outlaw Court decision. Oh wait, actually no, this is not the good. No, my definition earlier was better. And I think the definition you've seen on the previous page. By non-conforming use, let's highlight that. Its grandfather. So interesting thing here about non-conforming use. If the use is abandoned or the building is destroyed, maybe natural disaster, or torn down, any new structure must comply with whatever the local current zoning ordinance is. Local laws may say that the right to a non-conforming use is lost if such a use is discontinued for a certain period of time, usually 1 year. In general, though, courts have upheld that simple non-use does not constitute abandonment, and thus a reason for them to take your property. All right. The zoning boards and zoning variations. Write the word permit after variance. Variance is a permit from existing regulations to allow a use that does not meet the current zoning requirements. Yeah. Digital highlighter. Okay. Everybody got that?
Yeah, we got it.
All right. Now here's an example of what it makes sense to get a variance. If a municipality has a requirement that there's a 30-foot setback before any structure can be built, this house would be fine, but the neighbor wouldn't because 30-foot back there's a cliff or a mountain in the way. So they would experience a hardship based on this requirement of a 30-foot setback from the property line, from the street. So they would apply for variance to build their home closer to the street than normally allowed because of that hardship. You guys make sense? This is making sense where you'd make sense to get a variance when you're experiencing a hardship because of the zoning requirement? So you would apply for this variance from the local zoning board of appeals. You don't just say the city, the municipality. You apply to them with the zoning board. And then you also got to send out that letter to everybody within 300 feet, the opportunity to question it. All right. So here's an example where I had one of the students in one of my classes. You guys familiar with Colonia and the Colonia Estate section near Edison? Route 27. There's the train tracks on your left side. On the right hand side, there's a golf course. At some point, there's an overpass, and it looks like there's a little access road there that goes into the golf course. Actually, that little road on the side of that overpass will take you to this winding road where these $1 million properties are back there. They're kind of hidden back there. It's called the Colonia Estate section. And it's really interesting, really beautiful back there. I like go back there and ride my motorcycle sometimes. Just before you come out of that section over there, the road is raised. It goes up at a steep angle. So one side of the street cannot see the other side. So on the one side of the street here, you got this guy with his mansion over there, his $1 million home, and across the street is there's actually a section there that has your average your average priced home, little houses over there, within the Colonia Estates section. Let's call it the cheap seats of the rich area. Okay. So one of my students, she actually, her dad has a house over there, and his garage was old and started listing to the side, and it looked like it was going to collapse. So he tore it down so nobody gets hurt. And he was like, you know what? I'll just rebuild the garage next year when I save up enough money. He saved up the money and he went to go get the permits to build the garage. Goes to the city and the city says, you can't build a garage there. You don't have enough. You don't have enough room. Your lot size is not large enough. Um, and he's like, what are you talking about? I had a garage there before. I tore it down last year. They're looking through their records. They say, we don't see any permits for demolition. They could have fined him heavily for that. Demolishing a building, a structure without a permit. Well, but they didn't, thank goodness. They could have fined him tens of thousands of dollars, but they didn't. But they said, okay, he said that he did not totally demolish the building because there was still the foundation was sitting there, the block foundation. And they said, so you didn't totally tear down the building then, right? He's like, well, I tore it down and I got the foundations there still. He's like, okay, so the building is part of it still there. So we'll give you a variance to rebuild the garage. However, you're going to send out a letter to everybody that lives within 300 feet of you that you're going to be building the garage there. And so he sent out that letter to everybody. And this guy across the street who can't even see his property got that letter. And he said, no, I don't want you to build that garage. And I guess you don't like those people in the cheap seats. So he was like, no. Now, you could always require him to come to court and explain himself why he says no, and then try to make arguments back and forth on that. But that would require him taking off of work to do so, and having court dates and all that stuff. And it would. So last I heard in the class, they never rebuilt that garage. I don't know if he ever did to this day, but that's where it stood.
If you couldn't reach out to the guy and say, "Listen, what's the problem?"
He's just being a
Try to resolve it. Just
yeah. Yeah, you'd have to. He questioned it publicly. He said no publicly. So the only way to reverse that is to question his motives and his whatever behind it. If there's any legitimacy for him saying no, it would have been done publicly. Just going to the guy and trying to have a conversation at that point wouldn't have helped much. But anyway, setback is the minimum distance from a property line that any structure can be built. You have the front setback and rear and side setbacks. Like in my town, I know that if I'm building a shed, the rear and side setback, it needs to be 3 feet off the property line. I used to think it was 6 feet, but it's 3 feet now. Now the house itself, I think, has to be 30 foot. I think there's a 30-foot setback, 25, 30 foot. I got to measure it, what it is. And the width of the front of your lot is referred to as frontage. Okay, so frontage is the width of the front of the lot. If I give you a lot dimension of 50 by 100, that means it's a rectangular shaped lot. 50 foot wide, 100 feet deep. How do I know it's 50 foot wide? Because the first measurement is always the frontage. It's always the width of the front of the lot. Okay? Now, the frontage would be dependent upon if it's waterfront or not. Lakefront, waterfront, beachfront. The frontage would be on the more valuable side of the property there, which is the water-facing side. That's why they refer to it as beachfront, lakefront, waterfront property. Otherwise, it's the side facing the street. That's your frontage. Density zoning is zoning for the how much of your land you can build over. So if we're just looking at a house, if you got a house, a driveway, a walkway, a patio, a deck, a shed, or whatever over here, a municipality can create a density zoning ratio of 30 or 35% or whatever. These are just made up numbers. It depends on what your municipality does. Um, that's for a single family house, for a single lot. But density zoning can also be for entire subdivisions. I think that's the way they refer to it when they talk about questions on exams. It can be described as the maximum amount of homes that could be built per acre in a large development, but on a single home lot, it could be pertaining to the total area of the land that could be covered with structures and paving. So it's the zoning for the maximum amount of homes that could be built per acre. That's what density zoning. How dense, how close can we build these homes to each other? Building codes, the UCC, that
Victor, just real quick. So those are the numbers that 35%.
I just made
That's
it.
correct.
I just
Ah,
made that's just a made up number. You'd have to check with your municipality what their numbers are.
all
Okay?
right.
Each municipality, it could be drastically different.
And each municipality has a department that's supposed to handle questions like that.
Yep, the zoning code enforcement
Okay.
and or the building department.
So we just go and make appointments and go chat away.
Yep.
Okay.
Or you
All
could
right.
just walk, or you could just walk in sometimes too, depending on your municipality.
Yeah.
And if they have that department, some smaller municipalities they share city services with neighboring municipalities. Smaller municipalities, it may not make sense to have their own building code enforcement officials and all these employees to cover a small area. It could be cost prohibitive. So they share that with the neighboring town, which may be a little larger, that has that building and code enforcement officials. Some municipalities don't even have code enforcement. What they'll do then is the state sends out the building inspectors, and they're pretty rough. I know a guy that does that for the state, but he only does commercial properties and schools um, for the inspections. But check this out: the UCC is the Uniform Construction Code. That's the state's minimum standard for construction. And that database of building codes and regulations is maintained by the DCA, the Department of Community Affairs in Trenton. They also manage the licenses for any inspectors, whether they're state inspectors or they're private home inspectors. All of their licenses are done through the Division of Consumer Affairs. And here's a link to the license verification. If you ever have somebody that they're getting a home inspection, make sure you run the number, make sure that that person's license is active still. So we could click on that and it takes you here. You could do a database search for profession or license type. Let's go for license type and let's look up. I'm going to type H. Let's look up home inspector. There you go, home inspector thing. And we'll just search the whole state. And we could see there's more than 40 pages like this of home inspectors. But you can see some of the licenses are expired, active, pending, inactive. Some of these people may be dead. It's just a history of all the different licenses. And they got the license numbers, the inspector's license number, and the city. I'm not sure if this is the city where they live or the company that they have. I think it's the city where the individual inspector lives. Some of these people, it's not even in New Jersey, but these are New Jersey licensed home inspectors. Like this guy, he lives in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and he's a licensed New Jersey home inspector.
But do they have architects in this database also?
Let's take a look. Yeah, architectural exam candidate. Candidate.
That's kind of, is it the same as architect?
I don't know. Architect exam candidate. I don't know. That's weird.
No. And so, okay. This is for New York, New Jersey, the entire state, right?
Yeah, this is New Jersey. These are all the different professions. Here, let me see. Professions, architecture. Let's see if we can find that. Yeah, architecture. Here we go.
Okay. And
Okay.
okay. This is statewide, and I
Yeah.
would imagine other states would
Some,
have.
some people with cemetery licenses, architecture licenses, cosmetology and hairstyling, dentistry, diet, nutrition, anybody that has requires a license in New Jersey, which is just about everything, it seems. They got to be licensed through the Division of Consumer Affairs, except us. We get licensed through the Real Estate Commission, which falls under the Department of Banking and Insurance. Okay. So here, I'll share this link with you, even though it's in the Class Links Word document, as well as these slideshows. That's then you look up the home inspector there, make sure their license is active. You want to make sure that somebody, one of your clients or buyer, they're looking to buy a house, and you always tell them for your protection, get a home inspection. You want to make sure that that inspector is a licensed home inspector, not just somebody's cousin Vinny that knows some stuff about construction. You know what I'm saying? You got to get people in there that actually know what the hell they're doing and they're licensed. All right. Which, by the way, also your city inspectors, they're licensed through here. Yeah. So if you ever have issues with any of these inspectors, you could always file a complaint to DCA in Trenton. If they're asking you for bribes, I've had it done. Then you could report them to the DCA in Trenton or your local FBI. Had an issue with the Linden City inspector once, as well as one in Plainfield that was asking for bribes. I've actually had them with a couple of different municipalities. We had some crooked inspectors. The one from Linden, he ended up going to jail. But he knew somebody, so he got out early on good behavior, even though he got caught in an FBI sting looking for bribes from an FBI agent who he thought was a developer. All right, so so building codes are maintained and enforced by the DCA. Now, before any building, after any construction is done, before any building can be occupied, it needs to get a CO inspection. That's short for Certificate of Occupancy Inspection. Now, some municipalities have different names for inspections. Anytime you get new construction, before it can be occupied, you got to get a CO inspection. Anytime you change ownership of anytime that you do a remodeling job on an existing structure, the work needs to be inspected. Anytime that you change ownership, you need to get an inspection from the city. Now, some cities call all three of those CO inspections, certificates of occupancy. However, if you want to get really technical on it, there are different names that can be applied for the different situations. And some municipalities, like say Newark, they're very sticklers. You wouldn't think they are, but they are sticklers for their names, what you call their inspections. New construction, it's CO. Existing building that just had work done to it, it's a certificate of compliance. And if there's no work that was done, but it's just a change of ownership, it's referred to as a CCO, a continued certificate of occupancy. In addition to fire inspections that need to get done anytime we change ownership. So let's highlight that. Certificate of Occupancy, CO or C of O, or for an altered building, a certificate of compliance. In some municipalities, a certificate of continuing occupancy may also be required for transfers of existing buildings anytime you're changing ownership. So we need to arrange for those inspections to get done, or ask for the owners to go down to City Hall and arrange for them to get done. Okay? The majority of the municipalities in the state require it. And if you wait till the last minute to order those inspections, it's going to delay your showings or cost you a lot of money. Municipalities have learned how to make money off of you in recent years. If you need the inspection done in less than 2 weeks, they'll charge you several $100s for the inspections in some municipalities, where otherwise the inspection would only be like $30 or $35. So New Jersey does recognize the need to balance the legitimate commercial use of land with the need to preserve the vital resources to protect the quality of the state's air, water, and soil. And New Jersey is the most densely populated state in the nation. Little factoid for you there. Yet the majority of the land is undeveloped. Oh, this is the chapter that I have a bunch of useless factoids for you. You can put this information on your websites or make videos or blog about this kind of stuff, and that's how your real estate websites go viral. You know, if you just post, yes, I'm a real estate agent, use me for your services. You know, but if you have a website where you're making a video, maybe posting facts about stuff that people find interesting, you know, it could drive traffic to your website. Okay, so here's another factoid. Here's a bunch of them, actually. I got 3 pages of them here. New Jersey declared itself an independent state in 1776, independent from Britain. And we were the 3rd state admitted to the Union in December 18th, 1787. We're one of the 13 original colonies. That's going to be important for us to know in this real estate class. New Jersey is 170 miles long and 70 miles wide. We have about 130 miles of coastline. The state has 21 counties and 564 municipalities with 5 types of municipalities: boroughs, townships, cities, towns, and villages. We're the most densely populated state in the nation, yet the southern part of it is largely rural areas. So we all congregate in the north central part. And despite the fact that New Jersey is one of the smallest states in the Union, it has 5 distinct climate regions: northern, central, pine barrens, southwest, and coastal. We have the 11th highest population of all states, the 3rd highest income average. We should have another one there. It's kind of negative, though. Yeah, we're number 1 in the most expensive property taxes. New Jersey is located about halfway between the equator and the North Pole on the eastern coast of the United States. Here's our state birds, fish, vegetables, and all that other stuff. Yet we're the only state that has a state cryptid. That's a state demon, the Jersey Devil. You guys all know about the Jersey Devil, right? You heard of that before, other than the hockey team? You guys ever hear about the Jersey Devil?
I haven't.
It's amazing how many people have not. That's like people hearing about the Pine Barrens. Are you familiar with the Pine Barrens in New Jersey?
No. Well, I'm from New York State, so that's why I'm not paying attention.
It's still interesting stuff.
Well, I can hear you explain it.
Sure.
Okay.
So, did you know that New Jersey has more horses per capita than Kentucky? We
Amazing.
talked about the Kentucky Derby and the horse racing that goes on there. But hey, we're the Garden State, remember? We got a lot of farms, farmland. We got horses. We also got racetracks. Even though one of the bigger ones just closed down recently, this last year. Our mascot is the Jersey Devil. We originated from standard time we actually created time zones here in New Jersey. We're inventing flavors and fragrances. The first telegraph was sent from New Jersey. We had the first electric light bulb, the world's first boardwalk. Cape May is the nation's first seaside resort. We're home to 26 known nesting pairs of peregrine falcons, which are the fastest animals on Earth. We're the diner capital of the world. Probably used car dealerships as well. You see them on every road, right?
Oh, this is of the world or of United States?
We're the number one diner capital of the world.
That means what? The most amount of diners?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's a hard business. It's getting harder. The nation's top 10 producer, New Jersey is the nation's top 10 producer of squash, bell peppers, tomatoes, blueberries, peaches, and cranberry. Look at that. And you thought peaches were just for Georgia, right? The Georgia peach. No, New Jersey is as well. Italian Americans are the state's largest ethnic group. Paterson, New Jersey, has the second largest Muslim population in the entire United States. Second to, I think it's Dearborn, Michigan. New Jersey is the home to the highest concentration of Asian Indians in the Western Hemisphere. We had the first complete dinosaur skeleton ever found here. I believe it was the Hatterosaurus. And the invention of the first submarine happened here in New Jersey. We have the only president from New Jersey that served 2 non-consecutive terms. It happened again recently. President Trump. He's the second president in history now to serve 2 non-consecutive terms. The only 2 presidents to have done so. We had at least 100 battles fought during the Revolutionary War here. In 1776, George Washington crossed the Delaware River into Trenton to fight and ultimately defeat British forces. This was one of the first major victories of the Revolutionary War. American abolitionists, those are those to do away with slavery. American abolitionists aided roughly 100,000 Americans in attaining their freedom. But even before that, New Jersey made its mark in 1804. New Jersey passed an abolition law hoping to free more than 12,000 slaves. After that, the state formally outlawed slavery in 1846. Since this was prior to the Civil War and the national abolition of slavery, New Jersey became the prime stop on Underground Railroad routes. And what was one of those main routes ending in New Jersey? Mount Laurel. Remember? We the busiest and most extensive transportation system in the world. We have more than 2/5 of the land that's forested. We have 28 state parks and 11 state forests. Land and lakes and ponds cover 300 square miles of our state. There's a bunch of places where I got the factual information from. Here's some videos you can watch about the pine lands or pine barrens. Here, I'll play a short one for those who are not familiar with the pine barrens. I'll play the one in the middle. It's 2 minutes long.
If you have a 700 plus credit score, you qualify for Chase's new.
Let's mute that and skip it. And let me rewind it so you guys get this here. Let's minimize all the videos so we don't have any stumbling. And here we go.
Quarter of New Jersey with otherworldly beauty and history, including a hidden tropical oasis. Spanning 7 counties in South Jersey, you'll find a wooded wilderness filled with outdoor adventures, spooky ghost towns, and natural beauty that never seems to end. Welcome to the Pine Barrens. Visitors can start by canoeing or kayaking down many of the rivers that run through the region, including the 50-mile-long Mullica River, and get up close to the native plants and animals. Then you can take to the trails for some hiking, biking, or horseback riding, but not without checking out the Batona Trail, which provides comprehensive views of the Pine Barrens wetlands and uplands across 3 state forests.
Early English settlers couldn't grow vegetables here, so they called it the Barrens and pretty much didn't live here for a good 100 years because it wasn't what they were interested in as far as trying to make a living. It's largely been preserved because of the water. Underneath our feet, 17 trillion gallons of pure water. And that's the big reason why the Pinelands exist. It's so large that you can really be in places that you feel like you're the only person there.
Look at that for a second. Look at that scenery. That's the Pine Barrens. Did you know that New Jersey had this expansive woodland and forestry like that? Where, look, you can't even see a structure for miles.
Get a glimpse of history as you stroll through Batstow Village, a former industrial center that's home to 33 historic buildings and one of the oldest operating post offices in the country. Trek deeper into the Pinelands and you'll discover mysterious ghost towns like Harrisville and its great paper mill ruins. Just keep an eye out for the Pine Barrens' most infamous resident, the Jersey Devil, who's rumored to rampage these areas from time to time. If you venture off the beaten path, you might stumble on one of these crystal clear bodies of water hidden within the massive coastal plain, and it's pure tropical bliss. While these blue holes might look like paradise, don't bother trying to take a dip. It's not allowed, and you could end up paying a hefty fine. No matter where you go in the Pine Barrens, one thing's for sure, you'll only find this just in Jersey.
All right, there you go. That's about the Pine Barrens right there. The Pineys, the Pine Barrens. How about this? The Jersey Devil. Here's a little, let's see, the history lesson of the Jersey Devil. Here's one. There's a guy tells you a little bit history about that. Now we'll play that one. It's 3 minutes long. And in the meantime, while I play that for you, I'm going to take a bathroom break really quick. Okay, so here, let me play this for you, though, and get it streamed.
Places in the forest are scorched. Strange tracks are found round about.
It's a story Angus Cress Gillespie, a professor in Rutgers American Studies Department, has told hundreds of times. The legend of Mrs. Leeds, her family in the Pine Barrens, and the Jersey Devil. It's said that in 1735, Mother Leeds was pregnant with her 13th child. Her husband Daniel, though a good provider, was an uninvolved father.
So the entire burden of taking care of the kids fell on Jane Leeds. The cooking, the cleaning, chopping wood.
She couldn't handle another addition.
In a moment of perhaps understandable weakness, she said, I hope this one's not a child. Let this one be a devil.
When the baby arrived, everything seemed normal, at first.
But then something went terribly wrong. In the space of less than 20 minutes, the baby grew to the size of 2 full-grown men.
He developed coal-red eyes and a horse's head, bat wings, goat feet, and serpentine tail.
And then unexpectedly, with one swipe of his right arm, he slit the throat of the midwife and attendants.
Leaving carnage in his wake, the Jersey Devil flew up the chimney and escaped into the Pine Barrens, where he's said to have terrorized the people ever since.
Most states, there's a state horse, a state bird, a state flower. As far as I know, New Jersey is unique to have a state monster.
Gillespie is a folklorist, and he's quick to explain that the Jersey Devil isn't a once-upon-a-time kind of tale. It's a legend.
Folktale implies that it's fiction.
Do you think it's true?
I try to keep an open mind.
There was a rash of sightings in 1909. And in the oral tradition of folklore, Gillespie's been given first-hand accounts by people who say they've seen the monster or know someone who has. But he says, as a folklorist, it's his job to remain agnostic.
When I see reports of sightings, my initial gut reaction would be skeptical. I mean, is this photoshopped? How reliable is the witness?
The latest sighting? was just 2 weeks ago.
I mean, the legend is very much alive, and these sightings sort of prove that.
So as Gillespie tells it,
When you're walking through the Pine Barrens of South Jersey, listen carefully as the wind comes off the ocean through the pines. Old Mother Leeds.
and if you hear a twig crack behind you, beware. It could be you know who. For NJTV News, I'm Maddie Orton.
The Jersey Devil.
I don't know about that.
They have ridiculous courses about that in college. People are paying for a class on that stuff in college. Can you imagine? You know what? There was an interesting part, though. That wasn't even the video I really wanted to show. I think it was the history of the Jersey Devil. That one was pretty interesting right here. There you go.
You are watching Uncommon History. Stories that focus on unique and sometimes unknown New Jersey history. Brought to you by the Middlesex County Office of Culture and Heritage, the Middlesex County Board of Chosen Freeholders, and the New Jersey Historical Commission, a division of the Department of State.
Yeah, there's an element of silliness to this as well. But
The Jersey Devil is one of the most famous legends of America. The immensely popular magazine Weird New Jersey recognized the homegrown demon as New Jersey's oldest, most enduring, and important pieces of folklore. Some New Jerseyans still believe it exists, and ever since the 18th century, it has been cited over 2,000 times, as far north as Paterson and as far south as Burley. It has been described as having the body of a kangaroo, the wings of a bat, the head of a horse, and the feet of a pig. It has also been called a jabberwocky and a woozlebug. But how did this legend begin? In the early 1700s, in the Pine Barrens of New Jersey, there lived a craggy old Quaker woman named Leeds. She was the mother of 12 unruly children. Upon learning she was pregnant with her 13th child, she cursed herself, yelling that she wished the 13th child would be born a devil. Apparently, she got her wish. In 1737, as the midwife prepared to bring the beastly baby into the world, Mother Leeds let out an ear-piercing screech, and just after the devil child was born, it devoured Mother Leeds, the midwife, and the rest of the family. After it finished its first meal, the devil fluttered its bat-like wings and flew up the chimney. That night, the Jersey Devil terrorized surrounding homes and snatched up young children. The local legend impacted the region so intensely, a religious leader exorcised the devil for 100 years. But the exorcism apparently did not work. The Jersey Devil returned. According to documents from the Killian Foundation, the United States government sent officials to the Pine Barrens to search for the Jersey Devil. It was even referred to as the Jersey Devil Expedition of 1812. Among the more interesting details about the mission was the description of a female Jersey Devil that crashed through the roof where the expedition team was staying. It was shot and killed, but a claw and tongue from the beast were collected. And according to the documents, the entire adventure was ordered by President James Monroe. Unfortunately, corroborative information has not been located to verify these claims. The Jersey Devil has even become part of popular culture. In 1982, the professional hockey team, the Colorado Rockies, was moved to New Jersey. Fans chose the well-known legend as the team name, and the team has won 3 Stanley Cups. According to the Pinelands Preservation Alliance, the Jersey Devil was named the official state demon of New Jersey, the only state in America with such a distinction. The Jersey Devil has been featured on 2 History Channel series, Monster Quest and Weird US. The sci-fi program Weird or What hosted by William Shatner, focused on one family's eerie encounter with the Jersey Devil. The film The 13th Child, starring Cliff Robertson and Christopher Atkins, was released on video on Halloween 2002. There are even groups dedicated to searching for the Jersey Devil, one of the most famous legends of New Jersey, and certainly America. We hope you've enjoyed.
So that's Jersey Devil, a little bit of the Jersey Devil folklore here in the state. Have you guys ever heard of Jaws, the movie Jaws? Do you know that's based on a true story that happened here in New Jersey? Yeah. Before we get to that, you got Mary Ellis, the Route 1 parking lot grave. Anybody ever see that grave in the middle of the movie theater parking lot? No? Anybody ever see that? There's a magazine, and now they have a website, Weird NJ. They also have a Facebook page and such, and they got all kinds of stories specifically about New Jersey stuff and history and things. The stuff is all true here that they have, but it's interesting stories. How about this one? The final parking place of Mary Ellis. You see this grave site in the middle of the woods. This is an actual photo. Well, the other grave was moved, and the land around it had changed significantly over the years. Here it is when it was the US 1 flea market with the grave right in the center of the parking lot. And that was in 1993. And then they sold it to Lowe's for the construction of the Lowe's movie theater in 1994, where then they graded the ground level down even more, thus making the appearance that the grave is rising, but they actually just dug out the ground, did some grading. It's an interesting story about a woman who is going to marry the love of her life, a sea captain. And after he returned from his from a voyage he was going on. So the legend of how poor Mary came to rest beneath the asphalt of the Lowe's Theater parking lot on Route 1 in New Brunswick is a romantic and ultimately tragic story. Has anybody ever seen this in the parking lot, or you never paid much attention to it there? It looks a little bit different now. They finally put some grass around it and built it up away from the cars being able to park right next to it. Interesting story, though. In 1790s, Mary Ellis, with her young sister, they were both over there. They were both buried in that same place. But it was around this time that she met and fell in love with a man who was a sea captain, a former Revolutionary War officer. The captain sailed down the Raton River out to sea one day, vowing that when he returned, him and Mary would wed. He even left his beloved horse for her to look after in his absence. And every day after the sea captain's departure, Mary would ride his horse to her sister's house on what is now Livingston Avenue, down the banks of the river to eagerly await a glimpse of her lover's returning ship. In 1813, she purchased a parcel of farmland overlooking the river from which she would maintain her daily vigil. Mary died there 14 years later in 1828, still faithfully anticipating her captain's return. She was buried on the property and eventually joined with her sister and other family members, and according to local law, the captain's horse. So obviously he never came back. Back then, ships were sinking all the time. You had pirates and all kinds of other issues. Who knows what happened to them? But there's better pictures than this that you could see there today. Let me see if I have some of these. And let me see. Mary Ellis. Where is Mary Ellis? Jaws. I thought I had a bunch of things there. Anyway, you could do a Google search and we could see the grave of Mary Ellis. The grave of Mary Ellis in New Brunswick. There we go. Now let's take a look at her grave site here. Images. Actually, I think they have one right there. They dirtied it up a lot. All right, as you can see, let's see this site here. There you go. It went from this historic thing. This is on Wikipedia. Look, they made a page about it on Wikipedia. This was it in the early 1900s in New Brunswick from the family burials plot. Look at that. To how it looks today. See, they put it on a grassy plains, put it a little bit further away from the parking, so cars don't park right next to it, and then you got the grave still up here. So looks a lot nicer today. Interesting story nonetheless. But you all heard of Jaws, right? The killer shark, the movie. It's based on a true story that occurred here in New Jersey. And if we go back to Weird NJ, they got a page here. You could watch plenty of hours of YouTube videos about this stuff too. But it's actually based on true story. Starting back in 1916 in Beach Haven. The beaches were filled with sunbathers and ocean swimmers. You know, back then people didn't fear sharks. They thought sharks were scared of us. And until this guy, dashing young doctor and bachelor that all the ladies were swooning over, went into the water and came out with a portion of his torso bitten off. And he ended up still living for a little while longer until he died on one of the beach resorts front desks. And that was in Spring Lake. Then later on, a shark bit off both legs of a young swimmer. 500 bathers see Charles Bunder attacked, biting off both of his legs. He died in the in this hotel front desk there. And then further from that, we have the Magellan Man-Eater. That was what the story Jaws was based on, the same shark. Magellan is 2 miles inland from the shore. So, but there are tributaries of water, of salt water that then come up to meet the fresh water. They call that brackish water. And the shark is still able to swim in there. And kids were jumping in the lake here and swimming in that water. And one kid jumped in and he yelped and was dragged under. But then an adult saw that, jumped in after him, and he never resurfaced either. So the shark killed both of them. After that, there were hunting expeditions like this. People were searching for the Magellan Man-Eater, even trying to throw dynamite in the water to blow it up. Look at these ladies with their shotguns trying to kill that Magellan Man-Eater that killed that young boy. You know, it's an interesting story. It is so interesting, they turned it into a movie series, you know, with the Jaws. And here, the little boy that got killed, Lester Stillwell, and the man that jumped in after him, the hero that died, Mr. Fisher. And here's how the shark came in through these pipes underneath the train tracks. Even came into this area. You know, somebody drew that. That was pretty interesting. And then a reflection on the water makes it look like a full mouth. See, true stories. The Magellan Man-Eater. All right. And I got a bunch of videos for you guys to watch on your own time about that if you're interested. I could highlight them and send them to you in the text messaging there in the messenger, but we're not going to watch them here in class. We've already taken up way too much time on this. So let me close out a bunch of these videos here and go to slideshow. And I'll share some of these resources with you. Boom. There you go. Some of those are pretty long videos, so be careful. You could get lost in this. Some are 7 minutes, 3 minutes, 46 minutes long. So there you go. Anyway, hazardous substances used in construction and used in real estate. Apparently, we're going to go over this tomorrow because it's already 4:40. And nobody said anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to end class right now.